Welcome to the American Association of University Women and our wider community. Thank you for being with us today. This is October 3rd, Saturday morning, the pros and cons for the state of California propositions. My name is Regina Beatus of the League of Women Voters, Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville. The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan, and we are encouraging informed and active participation in government. We do not support candidates. We do not support parties. The advocacy arm of the League actually may take positions on issues and ballot measures. However, today we are presenting from the voter services team of the League. This is an education arm of the League, and we try not to take positions and advocate. So this is a webinar. So if you do have questions, please refer to the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A where you could input your question. We will try to take a few questions after each proposition, and then we'll proceed to the next. So we have 5 presenters today, and one, Rohini, is actually a high school intern, which is wonderful. So we will begin with Bobbie, covering Proposition 15. Are you unmuted? Yeah.
I have to start again. You can't hear me. Okay, I'm Bobbie Spike. Good morning, everyone. I'm to give you information on Proposition 15. Proposition 15 is aptly named Schools and Communities First. And the object of Proposition 15 excuse me, is to revise Proposition 13 that I don't know how many of you in the audience were here, Proposition 13, but that was 42 years ago, 1978. And what it did was give property tax relief to homeowners where the property taxes were going up. And it served that very well. But as a consequence, schools and local governments like counties and cities had a decrease in revenue. And as the years went by, they've lost even more. Proposition 13, unfortunately, had a loophole for businesses, and they were reassessed in a different manner, which has had consequences as the years have gone by, that the homeowners who property changes hands. The Proposition 13 had, when property changes hands, in other words, if you sell your condo or your single family house, it's reassessed by the new owners at a higher price. But businesses, property, big businesses rarely ever change hands. For example, Disneyland and Chevron probably will never change hands, and so their original assessment at 1978 values is still, they're paying property tax on that value. So the homeowners and people in condos and people in single family houses are paying much more than large businesses. So what Proposition 15 does, it does away with the loophole, and it gives a method of reassessing large businesses so that they will pay their fair share. This will apply to businesses that property is worth $3 million or greater. Closing the loophole and taxing the businesses at the current rate it is calculated will generate approximately $12 billion per year, which will go right directly 60% to local governments, counties, cities, and for services like mental health, and then fire departments, and about 40% to schools and community colleges. I am a retired school person, and I lost my job when it was Proposition 13 passed, and I cried, but then I got it back for the next semester, but I was one of the victims. So there is absolutely, the one thing people worry about on Proposition 15 is that, oh, they're going to come after my house. They just say, but it's absolutely no way that this Proposition 15 will affect homeowners at the current time. Let me give you the pros and cons. The proponents of Proposition 15 thinks that large, wealthy companies like Disneyland, like probably Home Depot, like probably Chevron, should pay their fair share and help their state and the services. And the new taxes, of course, that they get will generate a revenue to help our schools and local communities. There is an opposition, like there always is. The opposition says that raising taxes is going to generate income costs for everything we buy, like food, like gas, like healthcare. And they also say that it's going to hurt small businesses. And small businesses, as we know, are hurting during the pandemic. So that's Proposition 15. Are there any questions on that? Is she muted? I can't hear. You're probably
Just
muted.
1 second. So this is about Prop 14, which we will cover later on. So that's a whole different issue. It says, what about, we'll skip that. Let's see, I have one here. I live in Emeryville. I would love Pixar to pay more, but I think the city gives them a big break. Will Prop 15 mitigate that?
Well, Prop 15 taxes property. So I really don't know the effect on Pixar, but it's a property, just like Proposition 13 was all about the property we own where we live.
We have another question. What percent of California's business tax base would be under the 3 million cutoff?
Oh, that's a very good question, and I can't answer that. You know, property values really vary considerably, county by county, region by region. So a property in Berkeley might be worth more than a property in Bakersfield. I can't answer that.
Can I just say, so the 90% of the $12 billion in new revenue that will be collected, is estimated to be collected, will be paid by 10% of businesses. So, you know, small businesses will not bear the burden. Again,
Only property valued at $3 million or more, but there are written into the proposition, there are tax breaks for business, for a lot of tax breaks for the equipment that, say, a small business owns, so to reduce their taxes. You're muted.
If Prop 15 only affects large businesses, 3 billion or more, why do you say it will affect small business?
Oh.
Actually,
Well, some small businesses, and we might see them in Berkeley where property values are high, could be worth $3 million. It just depends on the business and where it is located. But that's the cutoff.
great. We can move on to Oh, I did want to mention something. There is the question about what happens to my personal residence. I'm at the age where I have benefited from Prop 13. Will this affect my residence and my taxes?
No, it will not affect your current residence of the taxes at all. That's a Proposition 13. Proposition 13 stands, except for we're trying to correct the loophole for businesses, not not any residents, including if you live in a $1 million complex kind of condo, apartment, will not be affected. Anywhere somebody lives is not affected.
We can now move on to your next proposition.
Okay. My next proposition is Proposition 23, which I have currently seen quite a few ads on television. This affects the kidney dialysis clinics. Now, as the aging population grows, there are more and more people who have had significantly high blood pressure and significantly cases of diabetes, which often lead to kidney failure. And kidney failure, people under kidney failure need to go to dialysis clinics. The dialysis clinics takes the place of your kidneys. Proposition 23 would require that the dialysis clinics have a doctor or nurse practitioner present on the premises at all the time. So it would do that. Oh, and let me say right now, I know at present most of the dialysis clinics in our state are owned by two very big companies. So we're up against two very big companies. It's not little places. So first part, it would require a doctor or nurse practitioner on the premises. Second part, the clinics have to report any dialysis infection, any infection related to the dialysis reported to the state. And the clinics cannot discriminate against clients that are based on how they're paying, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, Kaiser, or whatever. Then clinics would also need state permission before they could close or they could reduce services. So it sounds like the state is trying to get more involved in the dialysis clinic business. The proponents say that dialysis is a very dangerous procedure and they need on premises a medical doctor or nurse practitioner right there to help at the time. Also, Proposition 23 will prevent any kind of discrimination and to protect people in rural communities. So the proponents say that there'll be better medical coverage and that poor people or in rural areas will also be protected. The opposition says that these dialysis clinics could significantly lose money by these controls, and that if you require a doctor, nurse practitioner on the premises, that's taking them away from emergency room, and so it's really decreasing the availability of medical help. So on the one side, there's more controls by the state. On the other side, they're saying, well, no, we're going to lose business, or there'll be less medical care that's available because the doctors are not where they're practicing. So that's the arguments. That's kidney dialysis clinics. You're going to hear more and more about it with the aging population, more people on dialysis.
I see we have a question. Who is the sponsor or sponsors of Prop 23?
Well, I think you can see that in the state bulletin. I don't know if it's in Voters Edge. I know that the nurses, the State Nurses Association is supporting it. That's all that I know. But if you look at Voters Edge, that put out by the League of Women Voters, there's a lot of information about it there. But of course, it's being fought by the owners of the investors in the clinics.
We have another question here. Is there a significant medical benefit to these requirements? Some of these restrictions or requirements have been also required of abortion clinics with no medical benefit. But are there significant medical benefits? Not sure we can answer that.
Well, the only thing is that the idea of having a medical professional on the premises could help if something goes wrong at the time. I guess at present it isn't required, but they're saying it'll be beneficial if something happens at the time.
We have another question here. Are the two large clinic companies for-profit companies?
Yes, they're for-profit. And they're growing because the need is growing.
You can actually see how much money, follow the money on votersedge.org/CA to see just how much money is put into a proposition like this.
Yes. Okay. More questions?
Oops, just one moment. I think we have another one here. Is a LVN required now or an RN?
I don't know. There's a lot of I don't know.
Mm-hmm. We have some good questions here. Here's another. Do the dialysis clinics currently have a physician on call and immediately available when problems arise? I don't know if we'd know that.
I know that if it's a person who's receiving dialysis and they get into trouble, they can certainly call their doctor. But on the premises is different than a phone call.
Yeah. Great. So we will move forward to Nancy on the next propositions.
She's unmuted.
Oops. And oops.
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm Nancy Bickel, also from the League of Women Voters. I'm going to give you a brief summary of Proposition 19, which is a change in the property tax rules. It's going to create a special tax benefit for some homeowners statewide. If you're 55 and over, if you're very disabled, or if you're a victim of a wildfire or disaster that destroyed your home, you would be able to buy a new home and transfer your old property's tax base or taxable value to a replacement anywhere in the state. Also, there would be a benefit to people who inherit a home from their parents or their grandparents, and they live in the home. Then they could also keep the original tax basis. This would apply to farms as well. And all the money that is raised by this measure, and I think that must mean money, not just money paid by the new owners and the taxes they pay, would go to fire suppression statewide. So what's the situation right now? Everyone pays property tax if they own a home. In some counties, people over 55 and disabled people can replace their home with one of equal or less value without paying any more taxes, and they can do it once in a lifetime. Money goes to local governments. The increased taxes paid by the new owners, cities, counties, public schools, and special districts are the ones that benefit. Prop 19 would expand the benefits for people in these three special groups to the whole state. They could keep their lower taxes when they move to a new home, and they could do that 3 times, not just one. And they could get even if they bought a more expensive home, they could get a discount on that, on the taxes on that. If you inherit a home or a farm and live in it full time, you could also keep the lower tax base. But there's an exception there. If this was a very valuable inherited home or farm worth more than $1 million over the current taxable value, then you'd pay the new tax base. So what's the result? Prop 19 would increase some taxes and lower some taxes. Local governments would get more from the higher taxes when the old houses are sold and reassessed, I think. But they would also spend more to administer the law. But the amounts could, and these are big sums, could be from the tens of millions of dollars to the hundreds of millions of dollars. But most important, instead of sharing increased tax income with all the local governments, as is usually the case, this additional money, and this is what I think is a real question, would be earmarked for statewide fire suppression and also just for counties to cover additional administrative costs. So a lot of this money would be earmarked for fire suppression. So you can find out a lot more about Prop 19 on votersedge.org. Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Where the additional taxes come into play. Oh, so I see the question is, I don't understand where the additional taxes come into play. Okay, yes, it's true this proposition lowers taxes for the person who's selling their home and keeping low taxes in the new home. But the people who buy that old property, they pay the current purchase value, whatever they paid, which could be quite a lot more. And that's where the additional taxes come in.
I see here also the proposition seems to lower taxes. It's similar to what you are saying with people then buying other property at the higher tax rate.
Right. So, and I see that there's also a question, what is the public benefit of this proposition? Well, the benefit would be that it would raise an awful lot of money for fire suppression. And it would also give very special tax benefits to people over 55, to people who've been burned out of their houses, and to very disabled people. But it would, as you're implying, makes our tax system more uneven. Yes, and it's true. As a further question, it sounds as if an inherited home would need to be lived in order to keep the original taxes. You can't inherit it and then rent it, as far as I understand the measure. But again, check with votersedge.org for more detail.
Could I ask, Nancy,
Sure.
who is sponsoring this proposition? Who would gain apart from the taxes? You know, that's difficult to figure out, but
I think
there's somebody who is backing this.
I think it's the realtors.
That's right.
I read these lists of people giving money and sponsoring, but I don't necessarily remember them. And again, if you scroll down in votersedge.org under the proposition, you'll find a very thorough list of all the donors and all the supporters on both sides of every proposition.
But didn't the realtors back a similar measure, Prop 13, in the March 3rd primary?
I think you're correct.
Right. So they would gain.
Well, every time a house is sold, they gain.
Absolutely.
I see here there's a question or a comment. I think the tax breaks encourage the empty nesters to sell the big family homes, opening up for new buyers. And there is the homeowner does need to live in that new home. They cannot rent it out.
Yes, But I think that that's a very valid remark. Yes, it would encourage people to sell.
So that is a big advantage for the realtors, and Voters Edge, I'm sure, will show that. Great. We can move on to our next proposition.
Okay. Again, I'm Nancy Bickel, and this is a brief description of Proposition 22. We can briefly call it the Rideshare and Delivery Drivers Initiative Statute. So right now, there's a very important distinction in state law between independent contractors and employees. An independent contractor can choose when and where and how much to work. Employee schedules, but for employees, their schedules and work are set and supervised by their employer. Employees get benefits and protections, and independent contractors do not. So some of the benefits that employees can get are minimum, they have to have minimum wage. They might get overtime pay, paid time off if they're sick, and a variety of other benefits. So rideshare and delivery drivers, whom you call by apps on your telephone, include companies such as Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash. These and others. These companies currently hire drivers as independent contractors. Well, the California state law in 2019 required that rideshare and delivery companies hire drivers as employees instead of as independent contractors. Well, the companies are totally opposed to this because they make less money. The state attorney general and 3 cities, and so they haven't been complying. State attorney general and 3 cities are suing Uber and Lyft for refusing to follow the state's new law. All right, so this, I see, this Prop 22 makes an attempt to compromise. And if it passes, rideshare and delivery drivers would stay as independent contractors, but the companies would have to pay drivers 20% more than the local minimum wage for the time they spend driving. And these companies would have to help pay some health insurance cost for contractors who drive more than 15 hours a week. I don't believe it's specified how much they'd have to give them to cover some health insurance costs. And they'd also have to pay the medical costs when a driver is injured while working. They include some other benefits. Arrest policy, drivers can't drive more than 12 hours a day. They would prohibit discrimination, have sexual harassment policies, criminal background checks, and safety training. So Prop 22 would also limit cities and counties from putting new rules on rideshare and delivery companies. So it happens that in Berkeley, there's a proposed measure GG that would tax each rider on Uber or Lyft trips 25 cents or 50 cents, depending on what type of trip. And I wonder if this would be canceled by Prop 22, since the companies would obviously, even though it's a tax on the riders, it would have to be the companies that collected the money and paid the city. So I don't know what the ruling would be on that. The budget effect of Prop 22 would lead to small increases in income tax paid by rideshare and delivery company drivers, because they'd be making a little bit more money. But by keeping the drivers as independent contractors, rideshare and delivery companies would likely earn higher profits. One estimate is that from $185 million, they would go down to $12 million profit. I guess that's per year. So I see there's a question. Somebody's opinion. Okay. So it's an opinion. It's not really a question. So any questions on this measure? Prop 22? All right, you can find out more about Prop 22, including, of course, how much money the companies
I have a question.
are paying to support it and opponents are paying to oppose it, and who they are. So, all right, I see there's a possible question. I am bothered by the fact that this proposition can only be amended by 7/8 of the legislative bodies, and anything passed. All right, so it requires a it's a trick. It requires a super majority of the legislature to pass any modification of this measure, which makes it tough to make any corrections. And that's correct. So you can find out a lot more about Prop 22 on votersedge.org. Thank you.
Nice.
We can move to the next proposition, Nancy.
Okay. Where am I? Oh, prop. I think, did I skip rent control? I think I did. Prop 21. Again, I'm Nancy Bickel, and I'm talking to you about California Proposition 21, which would expand local government's authority to pass rent control on residential property. So some cities in California already have rent control, but state law has sort of limited them from any other cities from adopting any strong rent control. This measure would give all cities the possibility of instituting rent control, and they would make a greater number of houses of residential properties eligible to be included under the laws. So what the situation is now, California rents are high. No news to you. State law limits local rent control to houses and apartments built before 1995. In other words, 25 years ago. And current law says landlords can raise rent on new renters and on current renters enough so that they make a profit each year. But there's a new state law which now limits the increase to 5% a year plus inflation. And there are also new state laws to protect tenants from eviction, from rent gouging, and other problems. So those are all quite recent. Now, Prop 21 would allow cities and counties to pass rent control on all housing more than 15 years old. So it would suddenly expand the number. Not only would more cities be able to pass rent control if they wished, it would expand housing captured under possible rent control from 25 years old to 15 years old. And of course, every year there would be a new batch of buildings that had been, were now more than 15 years old that could fall under rent control. And it would also give a new benefit to landlords that when they have new tenants, they wouldn't be limited to raising the rent 5% from the previous rent, but they could raise it immediately 15%, but then that would have to last for 3 years, first 3 years, in addition to whatever increases are allowed by local ordinances. And those ordinances would have to also require that landlords would have to be able to make some money, what they call a fair return. This measure would only apply to landlords who own more than 2 housing units. So if, for example, you own a duplex or you own a main house and a little house mother-in-law sort of unit in the back, your housing would not fall under this measure. So it's possible, one of the financial results of this would be that state and local tax income from landlords could decline or stay or not go up, depending on how much localities limited the rise of rents and therefore how limited landlords' income was. The intended benefit of this, as the, I'm going to read you what the proponents and opponents have to say. They believe that Prop 21 rent control will help families, children, senior citizens, and veterans stay in their homes because the rents will be not as large, as rent increases will not be as precipitous as they've been recently. And they say that it's fair because landlords still can make a profit. And the people against Prop 21 say rent control laws will cause landlords to evict renters, and Prop 21 will make housing less available and less affordable at a time when people are struggling to get back to work. So who is arguing against, oh, this is from the previous measure, who's arguing against Prop 19. So for any of these measures, to see who's for and against them, please look at our wonderful app called votersedge.org/CA, which has voluminous information on all these topics, and far more than I could remember. And is there any questions on Prop 21 on rent control? Well, doesn't look
Not
like
so
it.
far. I
All
don't
right.
see.
So I guess I say goodbye and
Great.
check votersedge.org for any questions.
So we will move forward to Rohini on additional propositions.
Hi everyone, my name is Rohini Chokkalingham, and I will start off by talking about Proposition 16, which allows public agencies to consider diversity. This would restore the ability for the state of California to consider race, gender, and national origin in state contracts, employment, and college admissions. This would repeal Prop 209, the 1996 ballot measure that put a halt to affirmative action in California. This could change the way public universities evaluate applications from prospective students and government employees by repealing California's constitutional ban on considering race, sex, ethnicity, or national origin. This would factor into the decision-making process, creating affirmative action programs to increase diversity. People who support Prop 16 say that we are at a historic moment and need to strengthen California by fighting patterns of long-standing discrimination in all areas. People that are against Prop 16 say that approval of Prop 16 would be a step backward by introducing a new form of discrimination. Does anyone have any questions about Prop 16?
Looks like we can move to the next proposition.
Okay. So once again, I'm Rohini Chokkalingham, and I'm talking about Proposition 18, which is voting rights for 17-year-olds. This would allow 17-year-olds who will be 18 at the time of the next general election to vote in primary elections and special elections. People who support Prop 18 say that this encourages young people to vote and will increase voter participation in general elections. People who are against Prop 18 say that 17-year-olds aren't mature or educated enough to vote and should wait until they are legally adults. Any questions on Prop 18?
Okay, we can move to the next proposition. Thank you.
Okay. Once again, I am Rohini Chokkalingham, and I will be talking about Proposition 24, which is changes to consumer privacy laws. This would prohibit businesses from sharing personal information and limiting business use of sensitive information. It strengthens the 2018 California Consumer Privacy Act, passed by state legislators. It would establish a new state agency dedicated to enforcing privacy laws. It would increase financial penalties against violators and allow consumers to ask that their personal information not be sold. It's a very long 52-page initiative, and it's difficult to discern. People who support Prop 24 say that it strengthens consumer protections and it protects minors by allowing the state more power to go after companies that break children's privacy laws. People who are against Prop 24 say that it expands pay-for-privacy programs, allowing businesses to charge consumers more or provide worse service if they choose to exercise their privacy rights. They also say that the 2018 Consumer Privacy Act hasn't had the chance to fully go into effect yet, and at $10 million a year, it isn't worth the price. Any questions for Proposition 24?
Can I just ask, Rohini, what do you think of the fact that the supporters of this are James Steyer, who that has interests in the tech company and the president of the California and Hawaii NAACP, that those who oppose include the ACLU and I believe Dolores Huerta. There seems a telltale division of who is for and who is against.
Yeah, it seems to me like the businesses are a little bit more for Prop 24 and consumers are a little bit more against Prop 24 from my research on Voters Edge. Yeah. I see a question.
I see a question here too. It says, I'm a bit concerned on Prop 24 for ACLU being against it. Those against, in my voter info guide, are saying this will stack the deck in favor of big tech. So I'm concerned.
So this one is a little bit more of a statement than a question.
That's
I
right.
think this is kind of what Ruby was talking about too, for who is supporting this and who is against it. But yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, we can move forward to Ruby.
Hello, I'm Ruby MacDonald, and the first proposition I'm going to cover is Prop 14, stem cell research. Stem cell research proposition would authorize the state of California to sell $5.5 billion in bonds to support research, which is stem cell research, which is running out of money right now. This research would be to address diseases like heart disease and diabetes. 1.5 billion of the bonds would go towards research on Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. So clearly matters of interest to the public. This was started in 2004 by the state of California because at the time, the federal government was kind of dragging its feet on supporting stem cell research. For people who don't know what stem cells, aren't familiar with what stem cells are, they are sort of non-functional, immature cells, which can be made, hopefully, to mature and take the place of cells which have been lost due to some medical problem. Those who are for Prop 14 say that this is a very important area that the state should support. By the way, I forgot to say, the bonds would be paid off in 30 years at $200 million a year. Also, if the treatments are successful, that would be a source of revenue for the state. Those who are against Prop 14 say that the state should not be involved in this kind of borrowing at a time of economic downturn that we're experiencing now, and also that the federal government and private foundations should be the ones to support this stem cell research. There are also some suggestions that our current stem cell research investigative foundation is maybe not doing as good a job as it could. So are there any questions on stem cell research? So someone is asking how well the money is spent on this kind of research. And one of the problems with this sort of research is they are very long-term activities where you don't expect positive results immediately. And I'm sure there have been there's been some progress, but as you know, diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, heart disease, diabetes are of course being treated, but there's a lot of room for more progress. So on balance, I would say that there is progress. Actually, the League of Women Voters of California does support stem cell research, although they are neutral on Prop 14. Okay, so should I go to the next one?
Yes, please go to the next.
Okay, the next proposition that I'm going to talk about is Proposition 25. 25 is actually a referendum. So we're being asked to approve SB 10, which was approved in 2018. Somehow the backers of 25, who are mostly the bail bond industry, managed to get this on the ballot in November as a referendum. So the question is, should we get rid of the bail system we have now, which was the question in 2018? And at that time and now, the question is, should we get rid of the bail system because it's unfair for poor people, and mostly of them predominantly of color, who are unable to make bail when they're accused of a crime, but waiting for trial. And so the system actually requires, if they cannot make bail, for them to be incarcerated, which is, you can imagine, a terrible thing. So Prop 25 or SB 10 would allow for a new system of evaluation involving computers and so forth, but supervised by a judge to make sure that those people who can't afford bail would be evaluated as to whether they are a security risk. If they're not a security risk, they would be allowed to remain free and not go to jail until their trial comes up, which could be a long time, actually, given the state of our judicial system in California. So financial considerations, bail then would not be collected by jails. On the other hand, counties would not have the expense of incarcerating people who couldn't afford bail in jail, so they wouldn't have that expense. The only people who would really be hurt are the bail bond companies, which couldn't collect bail anymore and who are opposing this measure. The final thing is, apparently, if 25 is defeated, then the legislature would not be able to take up this matter again, and we would still have a bail system which is rather unfair to people who are poor, accused of a crime, and could not pay their bail. Are there any questions?
Okay, we'll move on. My name is Regina Beatus, and I'm going to look at Prop 17. And Prop 17 is voting rights for people who have completed their prison term and are on parole. So Prop 17 would allow people on parole to register to vote, vote in elections, and each actually become elected officials as well, or run for election as well. The state supervised parole typically lasts 3 years, and in some instances way over 3 years. And this is for those who have committed serious or violent crimes, not for the misdemeanors. Actually, currently, those on probation where it's a misdemeanor are allowed to vote. But this is a question more on the nonviolent, serious and violent crimes, people who are on parole. So currently there are approximately 50,000 people in our state on parole. So supporters say that people who have completed a prison sentence should actually be encouraged to re-enter society, and they should actually have a stake in their community. There are 19 other states, including the District of Columbia, that do allow the vote for those who have completed a prison sentence while they're on when they're on parole. So the opponents say parole is to really prove rehabilitation. So before anyone is given the full liberty of our country, including voting rights being restored, they need to prove their rehabilitation. And they feel people should really complete their prison sentence and parole before they're allowed to vote. So that is our Prop 17. We'll see if we have questions. And of course, voting rights, the league is always very interested in, kind of across the board, not having people disfranchised. This actually does affect and impact our most vulnerable communities, just to mention that. So let's see if we have any questions. Okay, oh, just one moment. Is it true that people on parole, here we go. Is it true that people on parole are paying taxes? So there are many on parole who are working, are family members, so they are paying taxes and should have a say for those who are working. Let's see if we have another question here. Good question. Actually, who is most likely to vote? How many of the 50,000 will register to vote? So the question is, who is most likely to vote, a teen or a parolee? So that is an area I know that our league has been doing a lot of work around voting for teens, and that was regarding school board elections, since that impacts our teens quite a bit, and they did not have a say on that. So the league has done quite a bit of work with teens. Okay.
Oh, can I just ask Regina, since there's time? But this question isn't implying that we have to make a choice, right? I mean, it's going to take an effort to advocate, help parolees, if this becomes law, to register and know the process so that they will be encouraged to take advantage of it. I know that the League in Oakland, for example, has a very active program, going to jails and trying to educate our incarcerated or formerly incarcerated of their voting rights. So that will probably have to happen if this does pass.
Thank you. We seem to have more and more opportunities of work that our various leagues across the state and country can get engaged in. We have one more proposition, and this is also related to the the justice system. So this is Prop 20, and this has some changes to the criminal penalties and parole. So in the past decade, California has passed legislation to reduce the state population of prisoners. And this was actually ordered in district court and actually was upheld by the US Supreme Court. We have had a lot of overcrowding in prisons, and there were a lot of issues with some of the penalties in the past. So they then redefined certain nonviolent felonies and had them labeled as misdemeanors instead. And they also increased the opportunity for parole over these 10 years. And through these measures, overall, the prison state population has been brought below 137%. Many of the prisons for capacity, and many of the prisons are actually still over that level. So that's a little background on Prop 20. Where we are. So Prop 20 would actually reinstate the Get Tough on law enforcement system. It would undo parts of the crime laws that were passed by lawmakers and voters. So some of the petty theft crimes would be punished as felonies. And they would change some of the factors that are looked at for the early release from prison. The Prop 20 would also allow the state to collect DNA from adults convicted for some of the misdemeanors, such as drug possession, shoplifting, domestic violence. So this is, supporters are saying that Prop 20 would prevent violent criminals from getting out of prison early. Prop 20 would help stop all these car break-ins, the shoplifting and other crimes on the rise, which when things changed, they were misdemeanors and not felonies. So that impacted, I think any crime under maybe it was $950, something like that, was then a misdemeanor. So opponents to Prop 20 say that it's going to roll back all these prison reforms and it's going to cost taxpayers millions of dollars on prisons. And they also feel that the result of Prop 13 is really an extreme sentence for petty theft, for something like $250 or so, a petty theft. And then Prop 20 also will be slashing some of the mental health and rehabilitation programs. So we'll see if we have questions here. So this is keeping us all on our toes that we have 12 propositions for our state. And of course, we have all our local measures, depending which county you're from. So that's what I appreciate so much about Voters Edge, when people say, well, I'm in Contra Costa County, you're the League of Women Voters, Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville. So you go to votersedge.org/CA and you put in your zip code. You're free to put in your address, and then your county shows up, as well as state ballots, county ballots. We may have a question here. Okay, that was just a nice little comment thanking us. So if there are no other questions, I would really like to thank all of you in the audience for engaging our democracy. You're giving up your Saturday morning. I know you have other options, but it's best to be inside anyhow because of our air quality. So it was perfect for you to be here. For further information and to access our videos of candidate forums that we had for Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville, and for league positions on our ballot measures. I know many of you are wondering, what is our league position? And the league does take positions, yes or no or neutral. So those can be found on our league websites. We have LWVBAE.org. This is our local Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville. So that's where you would find the candidates forums. You could find additional information. You also can find out what our league endorses for local elections. Then we have the state of California, which is LWVC.org. And there you can find and read further pros and cons, tell your friends about the website. And you can also see which measures that the state of California is endorsing. I have found this site very useful. And there you'll see the Voter's Edge link. And you also can find an easy voter guide. Some people are a little overwhelmed and would actually prefer not to even vote. And then we have others. Just the other day, my neighbor said, oh, I always vote with the league. But we want you to be engaged and look at all these resources. Here you put in your zip code for Voter's Edge, and you can find out who is behind the measures, the kind of money that's put. They have the top 10 contributors. And there's another thing I just found on Voter's Edge, and this is for your friends and family who couldn't log in today after we already started our program. We had to have people sign on an Eventbrite the day before. So I noticed here on Voter's Edge that you can find the Palo Alto League on another date. You can find a number of other options to review or tell your friends about the state leagues. So we invite you to join the league, become a member, help us engage voters and defend our democracy. Each election, I always feel, is a crucial election, and here we are again with a crucial election. The league does so much more than voter registration and education. So the deadline for voting, the deadline to register is October 19th. You can register on the online on the Secretary of State website, which is sos.ca.gov. You can do it so fast, which I'm sure you're aware of. So remember to vote by mail or to go to your polls by Tuesday, November 3rd, or drop off your ballot at a ballot box location, and those for Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville are actually listed on our website. So I want to thank you all the panelists who joined us here, and thank you so much for being engaged, spreading the word. We appreciate the American Association of University Women who were the impetus to actually set up this forum. Okay. Thank you all so much. Until we meet again at the voting polls. So we will end our session. Thank you.